U.S. military to our border and unleash the patriots of ICE and Border Patrol to defend our country from an invasion. This was an invasion.
At 4:22 a.m., FBI agents discovered what would become one of the most shocking corruption cases in American history.
4:22 a.m., Minneapolis. Winter frost coated the streets. The temperature had dropped to 11 degrees. Most of the city slept behind locked doors. But inside a two-story office building on Cedar Avenue, a different world existed. 23 bricks of pure cocaine, $4.07 million in cash, 62 missing shipments, and a Somali senator who had sworn an oath to protect his community. Ahmed Nure wasn't just a politician, he was a pipeline. If you want to see how deep corruption can go, hit like now so this story reaches more people who need to know the truth. The Cedar Riverside district of Minneapolis had always been a symbol of hope. More than 42,000 Somali immigrants built their lives there. They opened shops, they sent their children to school. They trusted the men and women who promised to represent them. Ahmed Nure was one of those men. At 58 years old, he had become a respected voice. He attended mosque every Friday. He spoke at town halls about education and opportunity. Newspapers called him a bridge builder. Parents thanked him for making their neighborhoods safer. But every story has two sides, and Ahmed Nure's second side was about to be exposed in the most brutal way possible. The investigation began 7 months earlier, not in Minneapolis, but in Laredo, Texas. Border agents seized a semi-truck carrying 340 kilograms of cocaine hidden inside furniture shipments. Whoa! The driver broke under interrogation. He gave up a name, Yaha Osman, a 34-year-old enforcer with direct ties to the Sinaloa cartel. Agents ran his phone records. They found 127 calls to a Minneapolis number. The number belonged to a community office, an office registered under Ahmed Nure's name. The agents couldn't believe it at first. A senator working with cartels? They dug deeper. Bank records showed wire transfers from shell companies in Dubai and Nairobi. $220 million had moved through accounts connected to Nure's programs over 6 years. Community development funds, youth outreach grants, equipment donations, all of it was fake. Comment exposed if you're ready to see what federal agents found inside that office.
Nothing happened. Too much had been revealed. Too many illusions had been broken. For many people, the hardest part was not the drugs, the money, or the weapons. The hardest part was the realization that betrayal had been sitting inside familiar buildings, wearing a friendly smile. Trust is slow to build, but quick to break. In the weeks that followed, conversations changed everywhere. In diners, in church halls, in grocery aisles. People spoke with caution, but also with honesty. They asked themselves how something so large could grow without anyone seeing it. The answer was uncomfortable. People stopped watching because they believed nothing bad could happen close to home. They were wrong, but being wrong does not mean being defeated. Life continued. Children still went to school. Buses still ran in the morning cold. Workers still showed up, opened doors, turned on lights. The city did not collapse. It simply became more aware. Ordinary citizens began to notice things they had once ignored. A truck parked too long, a form signed too quickly, a building that was always locked. They asked questions. They paid attention. They talked to one another. Not with fear, but with responsibility. A community that had once assumed safety learned to protect it. There were small victories every day. A neighbor checked on an elderly couple across the street. A church group organized a volunteer patrol around their block. A bank employee reviewed old transactions more carefully. A young officer visited a community center to answer questions. No single action changed
community events. Ahmed Nure shaking hands with the mayor. Ahmed Nure handing out school supplies. Ahmed Nure smiling beside a Somali flag. But Agent Delgado knew better. He pointed toward the back office. Our main target is through there. The second door was reinforced steel, deadbolt locks on both sides. Someone had spent money to protect what was behind it. The breaching team didn't hesitate. Another strike. Another crash. This time, the room they entered looked different. No photos, no decorations, just tables covered in plastic wrap and digital scales. If this shocks you, hit like right now. The bricks were stacked against the far wall, each one wrapped in brown packaging tape, each one marked with a small red symbol, a scorpion, the signature of the Sinaloa cartel's Minneapolis distribution cell. Agent Delgado counted them twice. 23 bricks. Each one weighed exactly 1 kilogram. Pure cocaine. Street value estimated at $2.03 million. But the drugs weren't the most shocking discovery. Behind the desk sat a floor safe, custom installed. Combination lock with a backup fingerprint scanner. Someone had invested serious money into protecting what was inside. An agent knelt down with a portable drill. Sparks flew. The lock mechanism gave way after 6 minutes. The safe door swung open. Stacks of cash filled every inch. $100 bills banded in groups of $10,000. $50 bills rubber banded by denomination. Even $20 bills, thousands of them, still crisp like they'd come straight from a bank. The counting team worked for 43 minutes. They used portable currency counters. The machines whirred and clicked. The number kept climbing. $4.07 million in cash. Inside a community office run by a man who earned $68,000 a year as a state senator. But the evidence didn't stop there. On the desk sat 3 cell phones. All of them were still powered on. All of them showed recent activity.
Oh, Agent Delgado picked up the first phone.
The screen displayed an encrypted messaging app. He scrolled through the last conversation. The messages were in code, but the meaning was clear. A shipment 47 cleared. Payment processed. Next delivery Tuesday. Same route. A judge approved transfer. No inspect. That last message made Delgado's stomach turn. A judge was involved? He kept reading. More messages, more names. Minneapolis Police Captain Brian Hennepin. City Council member Fatima Yusuf. Bank Director Samuel Ortega. Each name appeared multiple times. Each name connected to specific transactions. This wasn't one corrupt politician. This was a network. Type yes below if you want to see how deep this corruption really went. Ahmed Nure wasn't in the office when agents arrived. He was at home, 3 miles away, sleeping beside his wife of 31 years. She had no idea what her husband had become. At 4:51 a.m., a second team knocked on his door. The house was a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood. American flag on the porch. Children's toys in the front yard. To everyone watching, this was the home of a family man. A leader, a man who cared. Ahmed Nure opened the door
and bruises
in
healed.
pajamas.
The people did not
His
wait
face
for a
went
hero.
pale when he
They
saw the
became
vest.
wiser citizens.
Badges.
They learned to
Guns.
ask questions,
Ahmed
to look
Nure,
more
you're
carefully,
under
to
arrest
speak when
for
something
conspiracy
felt
to
wrong.
distribute
This
controlled
was the real
substances,
victory,
money
not the
laundering,
arrests,
and
not the
racketeering. He
seizures,
didn't
but the
resist.
awareness.
He didn't
Some
speak.
wounds can only
He
be
just
healed
stood
by
there,
sunlight.
hands
And now,
trembling.
sunlight
His
was
cuffs
everywhere.
flicked around his
Porches
wrist.
were
His
lit at
wife
night.
appeared at the
Curtains
top of
were
the
open.
stairs. He
Neighbors
was
waved
crying
from
before anyone
driveways.
said a word.
Doors
She
stayed
knew.
locked, but
Deep
hearts
down,
did
she
not.
had
A
always known
reporter
something
asked a
was
federal
wrong.
agent,
But knowing
"Is the
and
danger
facing it
gone?"
are two
He answered
different
with a
things.
gentle smile.
As agents
No,
led
danger
Nure to
never
a waiting
disappears,
vehicle,
but neither does
neighbors
courage.
began
The war
opening
was not
their
over,
doors.
but the
They
city
watched
was
in
standing
silence.
again.
Some held
And
their phones
sometimes
recording.
that is how
Others
safety
just stared,
begins.
trying
Not
to
with
understand what
certainty,
they were
but with
seeing.
clarity.
This wasn't a stranger being arrested.
When the
This
last
was
evidence
Ahmed.
truck left the command
The man
center
who would
and the
help them fill
headlines
out
began to
citizenship
fade,
paperwork.
Minnesota did not
The man
return
who
to the
had
world
spoken
it once
at their
knew.
children's
A city
school
cannot wake up from a
graduation.
shock like this
School
and pretend
graduation.
nothing
One
happened.
elderly
Too
woman
much had been
collapsed on her
revealed.
floor.
Too
Her
many
grandson
illusions
ran to
had
her
been
side.
broken.
She kept
For
repeating
many
the
people,
same
the
phrase
hardest
in
part was
Somali.
not the
How could he
drugs,
do
the
this to
money,
her?
or the
The
weapons.
question would
The
echo
hardest
through
part
the
was the
community
realization
for
that
months.
betrayal
At the
had been
federal
sitting
building
inside
downtown,
familiar buildings,
Ahmed
wearing
Nure
a
sat
friendly
in an
smile.
interrogation
Trust is slow to build, but quick to break.
His lawyer
In
wasn't
the weeks
present
that
yet.
followed,
Agent
conversations
Delgado placed the
changed
folder on the
everywhere.
table.
In
He opened it
diners, in
slowly.
church halls,
Inside
in
were
grocery
photographs.
aisles. People
Nure
spoke
meeting
with caution,
Yaha
but also with
Osman.
honesty.
Nure
They asked themselves
accepting
how
a
something so
briefcase from a
large
known
could grow
cartel
without anyone
enforcer.
seeing it. The answer
Nure
was
inside a
uncomfortable.
warehouse
People stopped
surrounded
watching
by
because
wooden
they believed
crates
nothing
marked
bad could
medical
happen close to
supplies.
home.
Those
They were
crates
wrong,
didn't
but being
contain
wrong
medical
does not mean being
They
defeated.
contained
Life
62
continued.
shipments
Children
of
still went to school.
Each
Buses
shipment
still ran
weighing
in the
between
morning cold.
200 and 400 kilograms. All of them had passed through Minneapolis over the last 19 months, and Ahmed Nure had approved every single one. "You use community trust as cover," Delgado said quietly. "You turn programs meant to help refugees into drug pipelines." Nure didn't look up. His hands were folded on the table. His breathing was shallow. "You have one chance to help yourself," Delgado continued. "Tell us about the network. Every name, every payment, every route." Nure finally spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. "If I talk, they'll kill my family." Delgado leaned back. He'd heard that line before. But this time, the fear in Nure's eyes was real. Comment truth below if you believe corruption like this must be exposed. The investigation didn't stop with Ahmed Nure. His arrest was just the beginning. The phones seized from his office became roadmaps. Each contact led to another name. Each name led to another location. Within 48 hours, federal agents had identified 14 additional suspects. Judge Layla Mahad was the first to fall. At 52 years old, she had served on the district court bench for 9 years. Her record looked spotless. She'd ruled on hundreds of cases. She'd been praised for fairness and integrity. But integrity has a price. And Judge Mahad had accepted $1.02 million to ignore certain cases. Search warrants that disappeared. Evidence that got excluded. Defendants who walked free despite overwhelming proof. At 5:18 a.m. on February 14th, agents entered her chambers. She was reviewing case files for the morning docket. She didn't even look surprised when they walked in. "I've been waiting for this," she said calmly. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She didn't deny anything. She just removed her robe, folded it carefully, and placed it on her desk. "I stopped being a judge 3 years ago," she admitted. "I just kept wearing the costume." Police Captain Brian Hennepin was arrested during his morning shift. He was sitting in his patrol car outside a coffee shop when federal agents surrounded him. He tried to reach for his radio, but an agent grabbed his wrist. Hennepin's involvement ran deep. For 5 years, he had provided protection for drug shipments moving through Minneapolis. He assigned patrol routes that avoided certain streets at certain times. He warned the network about upcoming raids. He even provided confiscated weapons to cartel enforcers. In exchange, he received $41,200 every month, deposited into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands under his brother's name. When agents searched his home, they found $780,000 in cash hidden inside a gun safe in his garage. His wife claimed she didn't know where the money came from. She was lying. Bank records showed she'd made 23 luxury purchases over 2 years. Designer handbags, jewelry, a trip to Paris that cost $34,000. Corruption doesn't exist in isolation. It spreads like a disease through everyone it touches. If you want to see how many people were involved, hit like and keep watching. City Council member Fatima Yusuf was arrested at her office on February 15th. At 39 years old, she was the youngest council member in Minneapolis history. She had campaigned on transparency and accountability. She delivered neither. Between 2019 and 2024, Yusuf approved 47 permits for warehouses and storage facilities. Each permit was processed in under 15 minutes. No inspections, no background checks, no questions. Every single one of those facilities was used to store or distribute drugs. Yusuf received $8,500 for each approved permit, a total of $399,500 over 5 years. The payments came from shell companies registered in Dubai and Mogadishu. Companies that didn't exist on paper, but moved millions in real money. When agents confronted her, she cried. Not because she felt guilty, but because she'd been caught. "I needed the money," she sobbed. "My mother's medical bills were drowning us. Agent Delgado didn't blink. Other people found legal ways to pay their bills. You chose betrayal." Bank director Samuel Ortega was the final piece. He ran a small community bank in South Minneapolis. The bank specialized in serving immigrant families. People trusted him with their savings, their futures. Ortega used that trust to launder $79 million over 6 years. The system was simple but effective. Cartel money came in as business deposits from fake companies. Ortega processed the transactions without filing required reports. The money moved from account to account, each transfer making it cleaner. By the time it reached its final destination, it looked legitimate. Ortega took a 3% cut of every transaction. That added up to $2.37 million. He spent it on a vacation home in Costa Rica, a luxury car collection, and private school tuition for his 3 children. When agents raided his office, they found spreadsheets detailing every transaction. Dates, amounts, account numbers. He'd kept records of everything. "Why would you document your own crimes?" an agent asked. Ortega smiled weakly. "Insurance. If I went down, everyone else would go down with me. Type justice if you believe everyone involved deserves maximum punishment." The arrest sent shockwaves through Minneapolis. Local news covered the story for 11 consecutive days. National outlets picked it up. The New York Times called it one of the most comprehensive corruption networks ever uncovered in a major American city. But the people living in Cedar Riverside didn't need newspapers to tell them what they already felt: betrayal. Ahmed Nure had stood in their mosques. He'd eaten at their tables. He'd held their children and promised them a better future. And the entire time, he was poisoning that future with cocaine pipelines and cartel connections. Community meetings became tense. Some residents defended Nure, claiming he'd been framed. Others demanded accountability. Shouting matches broke out. Friendships ended. Families divided. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal quickly. At a town hall on February 22nd, more than 800 people crowded into a high school gymnasium. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. They wanted to know who else had been involved. FBI Director Sarah Klein took the podium. She didn't sugarcoat anything. This network operated for 6 years, she said. It moved approximately $220 million through this community. It distributed an estimated 14 tons of cocaine across the upper Midwest. She paused. And it corrupted 18 public officials. The room went silent. 18 officials. The number was staggering. A senator, a judge, a police captain, a council member, a bank director, and 13 others who hadn't been publicly named yet. Every one of them will face justice, Klein continued. But I need you to understand something. This didn't happen because of weakness. It happened because of greed. She let that sink in. And greed doesn't wear a uniform. It doesn't have a nationality. It infects anyone willing to compromise their values for money. An elderly man in the back stood up. His voice cracked as he spoke. He came to America to escape corruption. We thought this country was different. Now you're telling us we brought the same disease with us. Klein's response was firm but compassionate. This disease was already here. It's been here since the beginning. The only difference is whether we choose to fight it or ignore it. Share this video if you believe corruption must be exposed no matter who's involved. The trial began on August 3rd, 2024. Ahmed Nure faced 47 federal charges: conspiracy to distribute cocaine, money laundering, racketeering, bribery of public officials, witness intimidation. His defense attorney argued that Nure had been coerced by cartel members who threatened his family. But prosecutors had evidence that destroyed that narrative. Text messages showed Nure bragging about his network. I own this city, he'd written to Yaha Osman. Nobody moves without my permission. Financial records showed he'd purchased a $1.04 million home in Nairobi under a cousin's name. He'd also transferred $3.02 million to offshore accounts in 3 different countries. This wasn't a man being forced to commit crimes. This was a man building an empire. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. When they returned, the verdict was read in a silent courtroom. Guilty on all 47 counts. Ahmed Nure showed no emotion. He sat perfectly still, hands folded in front of him, but as marshals led him away, he glanced back at his family in the gallery. His wife was weeping. His 3 children stared at the floor. Judge Richard Brennan scheduled sentencing for October 15th. At that hearing, he addressed Nure directly. You were given a position of trust. People who came to this country seeking safety and opportunity looked to you for guidance. He paused. The courtroom was completely silent. Instead, you used their vulnerability as cover for criminal enterprise. Judge Brennan's voice hardened. You didn't just break the law. You broke faith with an entire community. The sentence was delivered without hesitation. Life in prison, without possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered, others wept. Ahmed Nure was led away in shackles. He would spend the rest of his life in a federal supermax facility in Colorado. Judge Layla Mahad.
But together, they formed a quieter kind of strength. In the courthouse, the empty bench where the senator once sat remained polished. His nameplate was removed. The room felt different now. It did not represent power or status anymore. It represented a lesson. What failed was not only a man, but a system that trusted him too easily. Yet something survived, something stronger than disappointment. People understood that the system is not just laws or buildings. It is people, citizens, neighbors, families, workers, and when they pay attention, Even the darkest networks cannot grow forever. Minnesota was bruised, shaken, and changed, but it was also awake. The city had seen what happens when trust is blind. Now it was learning what happens when trust is earned. That may be the beginning of something better.
They stopped assuming that officials were trustworthy just because they held titles. A new generation of leaders emerged. Younger voices, people who'd witnessed the betrayal and refused to repeat it. One of those voices belonged to Amina Hassan, a 34-year-old social worker who'd grown up in Cedar Riverside. She launched a community oversight program that tracked city spending, monitored permit approvals, and published reports that anyone could access. A trust isn't automatic anymore, she explained at a community meeting. It has to be earned every day, with every decision. Her program became a model. Other cities across the country began implementing similar systems. Schools started teaching children about corruption. Not to scare them, but to prepare them. To show them that good people can make bad choices if they're not careful. And slowly, very slowly, Cedar Riverside began to rebuild. New businesses opened. Families stayed. Hope returned. Cautious but real. But nobody forgot what had happened. The community built a memorial in a small park near the center of the neighborhood. A simple stone with words carved deep. A trust once broken teaches us to look closer. Elderly residents visited the memorial often. They sat on nearby benches and remembered. They remembered when Ahmed Nure had seemed like a good man. They remembered the betrayal, and they remembered the lesson. Corruption doesn't announce itself with sirens and flashing lights. It arrives wearing a smile and a suit. It speaks your language. It attends your church. It stands at your podium and promises protection. And if you're not watching carefully, it will destroy everything you've built. Comment vigilance if you understand that freedom requires constant attention. The story of Ahmed Nure and his network isn't unique. Right now, in cities across America, similar networks are operating. Different faces, different names, same betrayal. Corrupt officials who use public trust as cover for private gain. Cartels that exploit weakness in systems designed to protect citizens. Money that flows through legitimate-looking channels and poisons everything it touches. The question isn't whether corruption exists. The question is whether we're paying attention. The raids in Minneapolis proved something important. These networks can be dismantled, but only if people are willing to look, to question, to speak up when something feels wrong. Silence protects criminals. Vigilance protects communities. Agent Delgado still works corruption cases. He's currently investigating a network in Phoenix that looks eerily similar to what Ahmed Nure built. Different state, different officials, same methods. When asked if he ever gets discouraged, his answer is simple. Every time I want to quit, I think about the families who've lost someone to these drugs. I think about the kids growing up in neighborhoods controlled by cartels. He paused. And then I keep working. That's the real fight, not the dramatic
parents to walk through the building and meet every staff member. Police officers visited neighborhoods not only to reassure people, but to listen. They heard stories about fear, disappointment, and confusion. They heard questions that had no easy answers. One afternoon, a young officer knocked on the door of an elderly woman who lived alone. She had been afraid since the raids. The officer sat with her at the kitchen table. He explained how she could call for help, how to recognize suspicious activity, and how she could stay safe. She made him a cup of tea. When he left, she said, "I feel better now. It was a small moment, but it mattered." In the weeks that followed, the city did not forget what had happened, but it began to understand it. People realized that safety is not something that comes from buildings or uniforms. It comes from attention, honesty, and connection. It comes from neighbors checking on one another. A sign appeared on a bulletin board in a community center. It had only 3 words: pay attention, always. Those words traveled across the city. They were repeated at council meetings, in church groups, at senior centers, and in coffee shops. They were simple but powerful. They were not angry. They were wise. The network that had caused the crisis did not appear overnight. It grew slowly, inside trust, and now the healing would have to grow the same way, slowly, inside attention. Minnesota was not broken. It was bruised, and bruises healed. The people did not wait for a hero. They became wiser citizens. They learned to ask questions, to look more carefully, to speak when something felt wrong. This was the real victory, not the arrests, not the seizures, but the awareness. Some wounds can only be healed by sunlight, and now sunlight was everywhere. Porches were lit at night. Curtains were open. Neighbors waved from driveways. Doors stayed locked, but hearts did not. A reporter asked a federal agent, "Is the danger gone?" He answered with a gentle smile, No, danger never disappears, but neither does courage. The war was not over, but the city was standing again. And sometimes, that is how safety begins. Not with certainty, but with clarity.
And they've decided never to
When the
let her
last
watch again.
now we know
In the
that we have to
federal
watch
building
too.
downtown, new
People
cases
nodded.
are being
No one
made.
argued.
New
Everyone
suspects are
understood.
being
A
investigated.
task force was
The work
created.
continues
Its name
because
was
the threat
simple.
continues.
Restoration.
Agent
Its
Delgado
job was not
stands
to
at his
punish.
desk,
Its job
reviewing
was to
financial
rebuild.
records
Members
from a
reviewed.
suspicious
City
nonprofit.
contracts, bank donations,
Insane
clinic
Paul.
licenses, security
Few
approvals, and
ends
employee
involved. The
records.
patterns look
They found
familiar.
mistakes.
Shell
They
companies,
found carelessness.
offshore
And they found situations where
legitimate
people had
looking
trusted
permits.
too
He picks up
easily.
his phone and
Some
makes a
officials
call.
resigned.
We need
Others
surveillance
stayed
on
and
an
worked
address.
harder. One
Start
city
tonight.
manager
Fight
who had
goes
approved
on.
documents
Share
without
the story
reading them
before it gets
apologized publicly.
The truth
He said he had
needs to
forgotten that
reach more
responsibility
people.
is more than signing papers.
legacy of
I should have
February
asked
12th,
questions, he said.
2024
I will not
isn't
make
just
that
about
mistake
what was
again.
lost. It's
In
about what
neighborhoods,
was learned.
people began talking again.
Minneapolis learned
Not
that
loudly,
betrayal
but
can wear a
honestly.
friendly
At a church
face.
meeting, an older
That
man raised his
corruption
hand.
doesn't
His
always
voice
look
was
like
thin, but
criminals
clear.
in
We
dark
cannot
alleys.
live in anger, he said.
Sometimes
Anger
it
makes
looks
us
like
blind.
senators
We
in
must
suits,
stay alert,
judges
and
in
we
robes,
must stay kind.
officers in
That is how a
uniforms.
community
The lesson was
survives.
painful,
The room was
but
quiet
it was
for a moment.
necessary.
Then several people
Because
clapped
comfortable
softly.
communities
Small
stopped
symbols
watching.
of trust began to return.
Comfortable
A
citizens
local
stopped
grocery
questioning.
store held a
And
meeting
that's
with
when
customers
danger
to
moves
answer
in.
questions.
Ahmed Nure
A school
understood
invited
that.
parents to walk through
He
the
built his
building and meet
empire
every
on
staff
comfort.
member.
On the
Police
assumption
officers
that
visited
nobody would look
neighborhoods
too
not only to
closely at a
reassure
respected
people, but to
community
listen.
leader.
They
He
heard
was
stories
almost
about
right.
fear,
But almost isn't
disappointment,
enough
and
when federal
confusion.
agents
They heard
decide
questions
to
that
dig
had
deep.
no easy
Today,
answers.
his empire
One
is
afternoon,
gone.
a
His
young
network
officer
is
knocked on the
shattered.
door
His
of an
legacy
elderly woman
is
who lived
prison.
alone.
But
She
the
had been
lesson
afraid
remains.
since the
And
raids.
that
The
lesson
officer
has
sat
spread
with her
far
at the
beyond
kitchen table.
Minneapolis.
He explained how
Comments
she could
await
call
if
for
you
help,
decided
how to
to watch
recognize
more
suspicious
carefully.
activity, and how she
There
could
are
stay
no
safe.
perfect endings
She made
to
him a cup
stories
of
like
tea.
this.
When he left, she
Corruption
said,
doesn't
I feel
disappear
better now.
because
It was
one
a small
network
moment,
falls.
but it
New
mattered.
players
In the
emerge.
weeks that followed,
New
the city
methods
ran in the
develop.
morning cold. Workers
New
still
officials
showed up,
get recruited.
opened doors, turned
But
on
each
lights.
exposure
The
makes
city
the
did
next
not
one
collapse.
harder.
It
Each
simply became
investigation
more
teaches new
aware.
lessons.
Ordinary
Each
citizens
conviction
began to
sends a
notice
message.
things they had once
We're
ignored.
watching.
A truck
We're
parked too
investigating.
long, a
We're
form
prosecuting.
signed too quickly,
And
a
sometimes
building
that
that was
message is enough to
always
make someone
locked.
think twice
They asked
before accepting
questions.
a bribe
They paid
or
attention.
approving a
They
corrupt
talked to
permit.
one another.
Sometimes
Not
awareness
with fear,
is the
but with
strongest weapon.
responsibility. A
In Cedar
community that
Riverside,
had once
children now
assumed
grow up
safety
learning
learned
about
to
what
protect it.
happened.
There were
Not to
small
scare them,
victories every day.
but
A neighbor
to
checked
prepare
on an
them.
elderly couple across the street.
teach them
A
that
church
good
group
citizenship
organized a
means
volunteer
vigilance.
patrol around
They
their
visit the
block.
memorial.
A bank
They hear
employee
stories from
reviewed
elders who
old
lived through the
transactions more
trail. They
carefully.
learn
A
names,
young officer
faces,
visited a
mistakes,
community center to
and
answer
they learn
questions.
to watch.
No single
That's how
action
communities
changed the
protect
city,
themselves.
but together
Not
they
with
formed a
walls or
quieter
weapons,
kind of
but
strength.
with
In the
awareness.
courthouse, the empty
With
bench where the
citizens who
senator
refuse to
once
look
sat
away. If
remained
you believe your
polished.
voice
His
matters in the
nameplate
fight
was
against
removed.
corruption,
The room
hit
felt
like
different
now.
now. It did not
The final
represent
word
power
belongs
or
not
status
to
anymore.
officials or
It represented a
agents,
lesson.
but to the
What failed was
community
not only a man, but a
survived.
system that
At a
trusted him
gathering
too
on the
easily.
one-year
Yet something
anniversary of the
survived,
raids, an
something
elderly
stronger
man
than
who'd lived in
disappointment.
Cedar
People
Riverside
understood
for
that the
40
system
years
is not
stood to
just
speak.
laws or buildings.
His
It
hands
is
shook
people,
slightly as he held the
citizens,
microphone.
neighbors,
His voice
families,
was quiet,
workers,
but
and when
clear.
they pay attention,
When
even
we
the
came to this
darkest
country,
networks cannot
believing
grow
America
forever.
was
Minnesota was bruised, shaken,
Believing
and
corruption was
changed,
something we
but it
left
was also
behind. He
awake.
paused.
The city had
The room
seen
was
what
silent.
happens when
And we were
trust is
wrong.
blind.
His eyes
Now
filled
it
with
was
tears.
learning what
America
happens when
isn't free of
trust is
corruption.
earned. That
No
may be the
country is.
beginning of something
But
better.
America gives us something else. The right to fight it, the tools to expose it, the system to punish it. Trar. He took a breath. Ahmed Nure betrayed us, but America gave us justice. And that's why we're still here, still fighting, still believing. The room erupted in applause, not celebration, but determination. That's the real story of Minneapolis. Not the fall, but the recovery. Not the corruption, but the response. Corruption will always exist, but so will people who refuse to accept it. And as long as those people keep fighting, keep watching, keep demanding accountability, there's hope. Not easy hope, not comfortable hope, but real hope. The kind that survives betrayal and builds something stronger from the wreckage. Hit like if you're ready to watch too. Comment watching below to join the movement. Subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation that exposes corruption at the highest levels. Because this story isn't over. It's just beginning, and the next chapter is being written right now, in your city, in your community, in institutions you trust. trust. The only question is whether you're paying attention, whether you're watching, whether you're willing to speak up when something doesn't look right. Ahmed Nure's network fell because people paid attention. The next network will fall for the same reason, or it won't fall at all. The choice is yours. Watch, question, demand accountability. That's how we protect what matters. That's how we honor the victims. That's how we ensure betrayal doesn't win. The fight continues, and it needs you.